I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting 88 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Pursuant to Standing Order 108 and the motion adopted on June 19, 2023, the committee is meeting today for its follow-up study on Report 3, Access to Safe Drinking Water in First Nations Communities, Indigenous Services Canada, of the 2021 Reports 1 to 5 of the Auditor General of Canada. I'd like to welcome our witnesses. First, the Honourable Patty Hajdu, Minister of Indigenous Services. Thank you for being with us today, and I hope that you'll be able to stay with us as long as possible because this is an extremely important meeting for all members of the committee. And also from the Department of Indigenous Services, Ms. Gina Lloyd. We also have Ms. Gina Wilson, Deputy Minister Joanne Wilkinson, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Regional Operations Sector, Mr. Nelson Barbosa, Director General, Community Infrastructure, Jonathan Allen, Senior Director, Curtis Bergeron, Director, Strategic Water Management Directorate, as well as Department of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, Georgina Lloyd, Assistant Deputy Minister. Minister, you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson.
Bonjour. I'm so pleased to be with you here on the unsurrendered, unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. And thank you for the invitation. I have, as you have noted, a host of officials with deep expertise in the areas of water and education, and I'm thrilled to be here to discuss the 2 reports by the Auditor General, one on access to clean drinking water in First Nations communities, and the other on the socioeconomic gaps that Indigenous people continue to experience. I also appreciate the opportunity to have a practical conversation about both of these critical areas of focus. But to do that, I think we have to go back to where we were in 2015. And to put it bluntly, the situation was dire. In November of 2015, there were 105 long-term drinking water advisories in over 67 First Nations communities. And First Nations have since then lifted 143 long-term advisories since we took office. And that sounds weird, doesn't it? More than there were in 2015. But in fact, these numbers, as you know, are not static. And indeed, it reflects the ongoing work of preventing short-term drinking water advisories from becoming long-term as well. There are no more long-term drinking water advisories in Atlantic Canada, Quebec, Alberta, or BC. And today, 96% of all First Nations peoples have access to clean water. As of today, there are 28 long-term drinking water advisories that affect 26 First Nations communities. But thanks to the First Nations leadership and persistence, including their ongoing collaboration with the department, I'm happy to say that there is a plan and a project team in place to address them all, which is a far cry from the approach taken by the previous government. Out of the 28 remaining, 17 infrastructure projects are complete, and construction is moving on 9 more. And these represent over 90% of the remaining projects, which is very good news. And we're closer than ever to fixing a situation that should never have been in place to exist, to begin with. Ces chiffres sont importants.
These figures are important, but they don't tell the whole story about the complex barriers that prevent communities from raising awareness. Each community faces unique challenges that require unique solutions.
First Nations communities need to be in the driver's seat to make the decisions that are best for their needs. For example, 2 communities in southwestern Ontario, Chippewas of the Thames and Oneida of the Thames, had the option to connect to the provincial water system or pursue an independent water source. The Oneida of the Thames chose to connect to the existing provincial system because their existing water source wouldn't be able to meet their long-term needs. And construction has started with a target end date of 2025. The Chippewas of the Thames, which I visited just a few months ago, opted for an independent system to ensure that they had full oversight over every component, from treatment to wastewater management. And they're currently exploring a potential groundwater source. It will take a full year of monitoring to make sure that it can support the community's needs in all seasons. In both cases, the community determined the best path towards long-term sustainable solutions that work for their needs and goals. And this is how it should be. Time and again, the evidence shows that Indigenous-led programs and policies lead to better outcomes. Now, on education, for generations, Indigenous peoples have been forced to conform to Western colonial metrics of success that don't reflect their own values. The Government of Canada indeed used education as a spearhead to suppress and control with the ultimate goal of, and this is a quote, killing the Indian in the child. So it's imperative that we do this hard work to unravel and address the cumulative impacts of these colonial policies. When we invest in education, we invest in the future. And following the lead of Indigenous partners, we're working hard to close gaps in education so that every child has a safe and healthy learning environment from the school facility all the way to the curriculum. Schools usually end up becoming multi-purpose community facilities for events and cultural gatherings as well. When I visited Casablanca in October, the celebrations for their connection to the Ontario Power Grid happened in their school gym. And since 2016, we've funded projects to build and renovate over 200 schools that serve 35,000 students from coast to coast to coast. Right now, 24 new schools are under construction, with 50 more under renovations. And I can tell you, when I visit communities, the new schools and the renovated schools are such a source of pride for community leaders and for families, because it is a reminder of the investment in youth and the immense potential that they represent. Les élèves apprennent mieux lorsqu'ils se voient.
Students learn best when they see themselves reflected in their learning. They're more likely to stay engaged and pursue their education. In order to meet the specific needs of First Nations students and communities, we are updating educational policies and funding approaches in partnership with the First Nations.
For example, we were the first government in the history of this country to implement funding parity so that kids get the same resources on and off reserve. We've also signed agreements with communities to return leadership of education systems to where it always should have been, with First Nations. And this work has led to sustainable, predictable education funding for First Nations communities, the required resources to develop and maintain culturally appropriate education systems, and a sense of being in control over the education of their students. These transformative policies have required us to rethink how we measure success. Indigenous Services Canada introduced new metrics this year that reflects calls by First Nations to move away from Western expectations of on-time graduation and towards First Nations-defined student outcomes. Il reste encore beaucoup à faire pour combler.
Much remains to be done to address the inequalities faced by First Nations communities.
So after a decade of conservative cuts, after centuries of paternalism and neglect, we're closer than ever to a future of self-determination for Indigenous peoples. And I hope that goal is something that we can all agree on. Thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions now.
Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. Before we go to questions and answers, I'd call on members for consent to ask questions. It's not my want to preside over a committee, so I just wanted to ensure that I will be able to ask questions within the normal time speaking limits, of course. Thank you. Mr. Vidal, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister and your team, for being here. Minister, I'm hoping with the late start that we can ask you to maybe hang in there for a bit so that we can get our full rounds of questions in. And if you're not able to do that, I know there's some discussion going on. I hope you'd accept an invite to come back and finish this conversation in a very short time frame in the future. So with that kind of out there, I want to talk a little bit about education results. Specifically graduation rates for unreserved students. Minister, you appeared back in INAN in March, and we had a conversation about this. At that time, the department had not yet identified a target for First Nation unreserved graduation rates, even though the 2020 and 2021 and 2021-2022 departmental results reports had committed to setting that target by March of 22, and then it got changed to March of 23. We had a lengthy discussion about that, and what was astonishing at the time was that neither you or the Deputy Minister were aware of this commitment. So in the official record of the meeting, there's an entry that says there's a voice in the back of the room that said it's in development and will be published in the next departmental report. Has that target been developed and published?
So I recall that conversation, MP Vidal, and what I would say again is that the target that has been developed has been done with Indigenous peoples. And I think, you know, reflecting on the conversation at committee last time, you know, what I will tell you that working with First Nations in a very intensive way in this role.
Minister, sorry, I have very little time. Has the target been developed? It's a simple question.
The target has been developed, and it's been developed in partnership with
Thank you.
First
Can you
Nations.
tell me what that target is?
So, do you want to just say the target then, Deputy?
So it's on page 28 of our departmental results report.
So the target, sorry.
I can go through the targets.
In that target, it says to maintain or increase results year over year, starting with 2022, 2023 established baseline. Is that correct?
Along with many other targets, yes.
Yeah, but
correct.
that target is established on that basis, right? So let me be clear here. For 2 years, we've been promised this target of setting graduation rates for on-reserve students. And what we've come up with after 2 years is to maintain or increase results year over year, starting with the 2022-2023 established baseline, which was actually the interim target in the 2 departmental results prior to that. So after 2 years, what we've been able to accomplish is to actually take the interim targets and determine that they will be the final target. Is that correct?
That target is developed with First Nations people. And let me tell you what Jose Thomas Areola, the clinical supervisor at Kiuna College, said about targets. He said, Kiuna College looks beyond numbers and statistics to measure success. Our students tell us that after studying at Kiuna College, they're better able to assert themselves, to ask for what they want and need. Sometimes a student's time at Kiuna College won't necessarily result in a diploma. Some students come to our institution to access services and figure out who and what they really want before they move on to other institutions. And the reason I read you that quote is because when individuals are coming, oftentimes from so far behind, the measurements that Western education systems have imposed are actually undermining the success of students. And so that's why the target creation with First Nations is so important, because that's exactly how we got here. In colonial system imposing Western ideology on Indigenous people, sometimes in ways that were harmful and oftentimes in ways that were extremely underfunded, including under the previous government, actually did more damage than good.
Minister,
and so
I'm sorry,
I'm very
but
proud of the work that the department's done to listen to First Nations people on how to do this properly, respectfully, and in a way that lifts people up.
We're talking about graduation rates, not college entrances and whatever. We're talking about graduation rates, and the reality is that graduation rates under this department have declined from 41% in 2017-2018 to 34% in 21-2022, and the target that has been set going forward is 26%. And so the measure of success is going to be that we maintain 26%, or maybe we get to 26.2 or something, because that would be an increase. That's going to be the measure of success. We have set no targets as far as where we go with this measurement, and it's a critical measurement in erasing the socioeconomic gaps on First Nations. And I'm astounded that after 2 years that we haven't been able to set a target. Now, I get the decline. The difference is because we've switched to the cohort method. I understand that. We weren't measuring that method properly in the past. So do we have the history? In your reports, it talks about we need baseline data to set the target. What is the history? You're not reporting that history in your departmental results report. So do we know, based on the new cohort methodology, whether 26% is higher or lower than it was in prior years?
What I would say is, and I would go back to the statements of First Nations people, because again, and with due respect, this government believes that we don't do things to First Nations, like has been done through many, many iterations of the federal government, but rather we do things with First Nations. And we do things with First Nations in a spirit of respect. I will say that StatsCan is showing actually success in this model. So in 2016...
Minister, sorry, I'm not going to accept the StatsCan argument, because the StatsCan argument isn't measuring on-reserve students.
Well,
your own departmental results.
Then maybe you will accept, MP Vidal, the statement of Denis Gros-Louis, the Director General of the First Nations Education Council, who said that it's a source of pride and it leads young people to grow alongside their cousins from other First Nations. All the culturally appropriate expertise we've developed over time has made it possible for us to provide that environment. We're one of the only CEGEPs that can claim that they have a graduation rate of around 92%. That's really good when you consider where our young people come from.
But in
Thank you, Minister. Sorry, Mr. Vidal, if I may, it's Ms. Bradford's turn. 6 minutes.
Madam President. Thank you, Minister Hajdu, for being here and bringing your cast of thousands. We really appreciate we've been anticipating your testimony. So I'm going to direct my questions in the area of water advisories. And in your opening remarks, you mentioned that the challenges each community faces are unique. Can you give us a few more examples? You talked about in Thames, they came up with 2 different solutions. Are there any more examples of some of the different challenges that the different communities deal with?
I will turn to officials in 1 minute, but it's an excellent question, and I think it reflects the different realities across the country, both from a geography perspective, a capacity perspective, a size perspective, and just the proximity or not to closer communities. So maybe I can turn to officials to speak about, on a more granular level, some of those challenges.
Thank you for the question. I think, and thank you for the invite to the committee again. I think there are 3 foundational factors that lead to conditions where there may be unsafe drinking water. And the first is largely about infrastructure and infrastructure investments, and that includes the establishment of clean drinking water systems, wastewater systems, and the distribution systems that take that water to taps and to schools and to health centers. That is a huge part of the investments that have been made since 2015, and it continues to be made to this day. The second point that probably requires illumination is around operators and the people that make systems work. And First Nations hire these operators to kind of manage their services. And there are many First Nations that have excellent service providers. And so human capacity and capacity development has been a concerted area and was pointed to as part of the OAG of where additional investment was required. And we've seen those investments since 2015. The third is about relationships. And I believe the minister talked about the importance of relationships in the education context. And that would extend to water and to many other aspects. And I think the joint stewardship of water between provinces, territories, First Nations, and municipalities is critical. Protecting source water, ensuring that sources of water are clean for generations to come, and the establishment of agreements between First Nations and municipalities is really another area where we're seeing success and is leading to the reduction, kind of the historic reduction of long-term drinking water advisories in First Nations in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that fulsome reply. So, Minister, do you have confidence that that progress that has been made, which has been substantial, is going to be maintained? And what else can we do to make sure that we never go back to the situation that we had before 2015?
Well, thank you very much, MP Bradford, for that question. And I would say, yes, the progress needs to be maintained. And I would say I have confidence with a government that understands the importance of equity for First Nations community functioning to maintain that progress. I would say that the work that we're doing on co-development of First Nations drinking water legislation to replace the repealed Harper-era legislation will also be a piece of the puzzle to maintain the ingredients that are necessary to support First Nations and continued access to clean water. And I would say that we need to work closely with provinces and territories and municipalities to protect the source water, as Mr. Barbosa pointed out. Many times the Government of Canada is in the very difficult position of replacing access to clean source water because of the poisoning of local water in community. And I think about Tatasqueak, for example, whose local source water has been poisoned, some say irrevocably, and the work to replace Tatasqueak's access to source water is underway right now. It is the building of a 40-kilometer long water pipe to a non-contaminated freshwater source. Those kinds of things have devastation, by the way, not just on the physical health of communities, but on the emotional health. When I was in Tatasqueak, the grief that people talked about witnessing the death of that lake and the death of the many animals that often still drank at that lake, the lack of access for their children to be able to play in water that had been there in their territory for time immemorial. That was deep and profound grief that I bore witness to, and that is not an unusual story.
Well, thank you for that. So it is important to hear just how much the outcomes change when the programs and policies are based on self-determination. What's the scale of First Nations control right now, and would it be possible for the government to transfer oversight of water systems to First Nations entirely?
In most cases, I would say that First Nations are in control of their water systems, and with various different degrees of support and external resources to provide that support. In some communities that are very, very small, one of the challenges is having ongoing water operators that can provide the ongoing technical expertise to ensure that the water is clean, to keep the plant running. And in those cases, First Nations have contracts with external water supports. I think one of the best success stories, though, is the Atlantic Water Authority, and maybe I can leave that with Nelson to talk a little bit about. It's such an amazing story of collective work to protect water.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think, firstly, First Nations are the owners and operators of their water systems, and the role of Indigenous Services Canada is to support that ownership and the control of First Nations over their systems, whether it be through capital or whether it be through operator supports or whether it be through partnerships. So I appreciate that question. In terms of transfer, one of the
Brièvement, Monsieur.
Very briefly, sir, your time has already run out.
component, and we would like to kind of talk about the AFNW, Atlantic First Nations Water Authority, and their assumption of the care and control of water for thousands. 4,500 homes will now be managed by the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority in Atlantic Canada, building the first municipal model controlled by First Nations in this country, and that was done by the design and by the efforts of First Nations people in Atlantic Canada. Thank you so much.
Merci. Je vais procéder avec un.
Thank you. I'll now ask 6 minutes of questions myself. Minister, thank you again for being in attendance. If I could just remind folks of the context of the audits that were conducted by the OAG, 4 different reports in the 5 last years. In the spring of 2018, there was already a performance audit on Indigenous Services Canada, and in relation to the audit, the auditor said that the lack of progress in Indigenous issues was unacceptable and unable to be understood, and that was before you became minister. In February 2021, the OAG published a report on the lack of safe drinking water. We're talking about that today. In 2015, the federal government had already promised to address this issue that had been long overdue. And today, this issue is still not resolved. In 2021, the report on healthcare services for Indigenous persons was tabled in the House of Commons, and the OAG deduced that there were no proper supplies provided. That's another failure. In 2022, the OAG published a report on emergency services on reserves. Indigenous Services Canada didn't provide those communities what they needed to manage emergencies. The department invested 3.5 times more in addressing the issues after the fact than in preventing them in the first place, and you were already minister at the time. Another example, the OAG observed that 4 out of 7 regional officers developed an emergency management plan. Minister, concretely speaking, has the plight of Indigenous persons in Canada, is it still a phenomenal failure, or can you tell us in front of everyone listening to us that the situation has greatly improved since you became minister?
Donc, comme à l'habitude.
So, as usual in this committee, if the bells ring, well, we have how much time? 15 minutes? 28 minutes, in fact. It's just nearby, so I ask for consent to continue with our rounds of questions and then allow parliamentarians 10 minutes to then go and vote. Do we have consent? Yes. Your response, please, Minister.
Very much for the question, and I think your list of Auditor General reports that speak to the ongoing challenge of Indigenous people in a systemically oppressive colonizing system is a fair question. And what I would say is that under our federal government, we have put reconciliation at the core under the federal Liberal government. And in 2015, and I was very proud to campaign for a prime minister that made a commitment to lift all boil water advisories, which was an ambitious commitment, but actually actually set a goal for this country to actually reach towards that goal with tangible investments of money, expertise, and a new way of doing work with First Nations, not imposing solutions on First Nations, but working with First Nations on solutions that First Nations for many, many generations have known that if they could control, they could do much better. And so what I would say is, there has been an increase in Indigenous spending by 168% since 2015. Is it enough to close the gap? I fundamentally think that it is not. We know what the gap is in housing and on infrastructure, for example, and in many other spaces. But what I can say is that the partnership with First Nations has improved dramatically since 2015. First Nations people feel now that they are at the table, that they are in the space where they are making decisions for their communities, where they are working with a federal government that wants to be a willing partner, a fair partner, and a supportive partner. And that's a sea change since 2015.
Merci.
Thank you. On the 3rd of March 2023, there were still 32 safe drinking water advisories. Now, the time frame for the plan put in place long-term solutions to avoid safe drinking water problems on reserve, and that will expire in 2026. In your opinion, will you be able to attain your objectives, or will that... Will you be able to attain your objective, i.e. safe drinking water, which is a fundamental right on reserve across all reserves in Canada by 2026?
What I can say is that the communities that still remain with long-term drinking waters all either have construction on the go, projects that are complete, or very few that are working on what appropriate solution is for them. And what I can also say is that the commitment, the fiscal commitment is there to complete all that work. The speed at which we work is intertwined with self-determination. And so the federal government's job is to be there with the tools and with the fiscal equity that makes these projects viable and makes people able to have the supports, gives people the supports that they need to be able to sustain clean water in their community, whether it's equity for operations, whether it's the importance of upgrading systems before they become obsolete and having the fiscal capacity to do that, or whether it's supporting communities with the tools they need to feel comfortable to lift those long-term drinking water advisories, which sometimes communities don't feel comfortable with immediately.
Merci.
Thank you, Minister. Now, listening to you, the department is doing everything in its power to ensure that this very serious problem will be addressed. So are you saying that this is Indigenous people's fault if they don't have clean drinking water on reserve?
No, I said nothing of the sort. And in fact, what I have said is that what has been a failure of this government, I would say Canadian government, what I mean, is ongoing imposition of colonial approaches to community functioning. This country was formed, listen, in my opening statement, I acknowledge the unceded and
But you're the minister.
People. That means that land was taken from Indigenous people, children were taken from Indigenous people, power was taken from Indigenous people, and resources were taken from Indigenous people. And this Liberal government understands that the way to reconciliation is actually ensuring the tools of self-determination and equity are in place. And I'm really proud of that work, Madam Chair, and I certainly would never ever imply that Indigenous people are the cause of their own suffering. In fact, it's a colonial system that has caused that suffering, and I think all members of Parliament should know by now the history of this country.
Monsieur Desjarlais, vous avez 6 minutes.
Mr. Desjarlais, 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and I find myself often disappointed in this space, so I'll share not my words, but the questions of the Treaty Chiefs of Alberta that are often my teachers in this work, and they supply me with good questions here that I hope you can address on their behalf. And if you can speak directly to those concerns that they have, would be my hope. You mentioned the framework the tools and the funding that's required to end this crisis. First Nations also need this to be done. And they want to be partners in much of this work, but find themselves not in a position that they're feeling heard. You mentioned they feel heard. That's not what I hear. Certainly not what they say. Those who are witnessing this right now, the Treaty Chiefs of Alberta, to them, I want to thank them for their leadership in this space and providing me with very difficult questions that I hope you can provide. I know you're not going to be here for very long today, so if I can't get through the total list of the questions they provided, submit them to your office, then I hope you can reply. The first one is, can you commit to the pending water legislation will not leave First Nations with the problem that excessive government policy and lack of adequate funding created? Where is the funding attached to this initiative, particularly in the time of austerity?
First of all, I want to thank the Treaty 8 chiefs myself, because I have met with them a number of times on water, on many other issues. In fact, I would agree that the Treaty 8 chiefs have often given me the history lessons that I need to understand not just Treaty 8 issues and historical experiences, but certainly their experience as communities that have been deeply affected by colonization. So I acknowledge the leadership of Treaty 8. What I would say is that the First Nations water legislation has been a process of collaboration, not just with Treaty 8, but certainly with First Nations, through the AFN, a variety of different First Nations deeply affected by boil water advisories, who are the litigant group in this case, and many experts and advisors from First Nations leadership roles that have given us a sense of where the legislation should go, and I look forward to being able to table that in this House and hearing the feedback from First Nations. And I know that the NDP, the Conservative members, and the Liberal members will have thoughtful deliberations on that legislation with the intent of making sure it's strong and reaches its goal of protecting water on First Nations.
So what about the austerity portion that they're concerned about?
Well, listen, this government has invested billions and billions of dollars. In fact, at latest count, somewhere in the range of $8 billion and counting on not just the infrastructure, but the, as I said, ongoing addressing of long-standing operation deficits and supports for training and new models like the Atlantic Water Authority to ensure that we get to this goal. So what I would say through you to the Treaty 8 chiefs is that is a commitment of this Liberal government, that we will be there with the resources needed, with the expertise that communities may want to tap into, and with the support for models that First Nations people themselves determine are going to be the most useful in protecting the water in their communities.
Do you commit to meet with all treaty chiefs of Treaty 8? In addition, all tribal treaty chiefs in Alberta? In addition, do you commit to at least a minimal engagement that provides direct consultation to First Nations government and their citizens by way of ensuring that they're clear about the legislative priorities that you have, while also ensuring that their words and their advice are actually input into the legislation? The biggest concern they have here largely is in relation to the term you use, which is co-development. They believe earnestly it's not co-development. That's a concern, Minister. And you can't say that you've co-developed these things when your partner's not saying the same thing. It's like going to a dance party and saying, I'm dancing with this person, and there's no one dancing. So who are you co-developing this with?
Well, thank you for that. And you're right. The word co-development is a challenging space because it's never been tried before, actually ever, in the history of this country. Has law ever been developed with Indigenous peoples? And I would imagine that there will be lots of different perspectives on the depth of the engagement, on the true nature of co-development, on whether this approaches co-development. I am certain there will be feedback on how better to do the creation of law in this country with Indigenous peoples. I know that the UN Declaration Act that this Liberal government passed will provide many useful tools for First Nations people, Indigenous people into the future on having a much more active role in creating law. And I look forward to the way that Parliament will be thoughtful about proposing amendments. What happens when amendments are proposed by Conservatives, for example, that may weaken the legislation or strengthen it? How will the NDP interact with First Nations partners as they consider which amendments to propose? How will the NDP do their own consultation to make sure that it's not... What happens if there's a conflict?
You're the minister and you're the
Treaty 8
government
and
here.
Treaty 6?
And so you can ask me questions. Minister, this is my time. You can ask these questions to the parties, and you can ask those questions, and you can stand here today. And I'm not going to berate you, nor will I participate in any kind of process that would undermine the good work of First Nations. I think this question's simple. They only want to know if you're going
A very quick and brief question, sir, please.
My response, MP, is that I have worked very closely with First Nations through this process, and I will continue to endeavour to consult with Indigenous leaders who wish to be part of this process.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Vidal. Vous avez donc...
Thank you, Mr. Vidal. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to follow up the conversation, but I want to stick to grad rates for a little bit because I had a couple more questions that I didn't get to, Minister. In the briefing document that your department prepared for you when you appeared at INAN back in March, they included some statistics, I can hardly say that, statistics on education attainment of First Nations secondary, high school, or diploma equivalency. And in your opening comments, you talked about those statistics and how the improvements were happening and whatnot. And in the meeting, then I challenged you, and we did a little bit here earlier today, that the data from your own departmental results don't line up with those statistics. In fact, the data in your own departmental results reports indicate that graduation rates for on-reserve students have declined from 41% to 34.2%. I'm curious, did you ever question your officials on the discrepancy between those two sets of numbers after we had the conversation back in March?
I will turn to the deputy to speak.
No, I asked if you questioned the officials of the discrepancy of the numbers that were provided to you.
I'm very fortunate to work very closely with all of the officials at this table. And so, of course, we have extensive conversations about education, about water, about infrastructure, and about committee appearances. So
my question was simply, did you ever question them about the discrepancy of those numbers? I don't think you're official. I'm asking if you did.
Yes, of course. And I would like to turn to the deputy to give you some responses on that.
Okay, briefly, please.
Briefly, so any increase in student graduation is positive, I would say. And in November of 2022, we did advise this committee that we were developing a new graduation rate methodology. So we actually did do that in consultation with First Nations organizations, because they told us very clearly that they did not want us to develop unilaterally established targets.
Okay, fair enough. Deputy Minister, that wasn't, sorry, just for clarity, that wasn't my question. I just want to be clear. My question was about the difference in the speaking notes that were provided for the minister and what the actual departmental results spoke of, and there was clearly some discrepancies there. To me, it was frustrating the fact that we have these Statistics Canada numbers that are being put before the minister that display progress on something, but within the own departmental results, we're not seeing that same progress. That was the frustrating component, and that's why I'm drilling into this. And, you know, the frustrating part for me is that, you know, at best that displays, you know, some level of incompetence, and I hate to say that, but at worst, it displays an attempt to be deceptive, that we're not actually even talking in public about our own departmental results reports. And that's the frustrating part for me. And this is a department where, under this core responsibility area, where I know you're changing to something new next year, but under this core responsibility area in 2022, 2023, it was a $10 billion budget, and it utilized 300 additional FTEs over what was planned, which is 17%. And overall, the department met 17% of the targets that they set for themselves in that fiscal year. That's the frustration. And I guess I would suggest, Minister, that for 4 years now, I've heard from the Auditor General reports, I've heard from the Parliamentary Budget Officer, I've heard from First Nation witnesses at committees, both this committee and at INAN, and I've heard from people on the ground, like my colleague MP Desjardins just talked about, who are exhausted by some of the inadequacies and frustrations with the department. quite frankly, the elephant in the room and the roadblock to actually achieving outcomes is some of the bureaucracy that happens in the department when, we're focused on changing goals and moving targets so that accountability never falls on the laps of the people in the room, so to speak. The lives of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people should not be a make-work project for this department. They should not be treated as such. There may be some success in the context of saving jobs and whatnot, but it's being done at the cost of Indigenous people across our country. And frankly, it's my job, Minister, to hold you accountable. It's your job to hold them accountable. And I'm asking, how are you doing that? How are you holding them accountable for some of these things I'm talking about?
Well, I hold the officials accountable every single day, and I do it through honest, open communication and collaboration, and quite frankly, an insistence that we work at the behest of First Nations with First Nations in a First Nations determined approach. And I would say that the department, led by this incredible Indigenous woman herself, who has been not only a civil servant, but a proud member of Kittigan-Ziibi, has a really good ground level understanding of what happens in community and what happens in government. And that gives me comfort, actually, MP Vidal, that we have both.
Thank you, Minister.
Now and Indigenous Services Canada, Indigenous women who have lived the reality in community and who also have lived the reality as longtime civil servants and give me what I would say is exceptional advice. And so I will
meeting
turn
17% of...
Sorry, Mr. Vidal, your time has indeed run out. I apologise. We have 11 and a half minutes left before we have to leave for the vote. Ms. Khalid, please go ahead, and then we will free members to go and vote.
President.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister and officials, for coming in today. I'll continue a little bit with what MP Vidal was, I'm hoping, trying to say. Minister, over 150 years later, we are now prioritizing the work that you have been doing so diligently. I mean, 143 long-term advisories lifted. There's been significant work on education of Indigenous communities and First Nation communities. There's that nation-to-nation community building that is happening. Minister, how do you ensure the longevity and the permanence of the work that you're doing, regardless of which government is in power in the day, to make sure that all of this is not the whim of whichever government is going to prioritize or not?
That's such a great question, and I think there are a couple different elements, I think, of longevity. And one is legislation that exists that sets the Government of Canada on a path of commitment to First Nations in the area of equity, as I mentioned, equal funding for services on First Nations than exist in non-Indigenous communities, municipalities oftentimes just adjacent to that community. The second thing I would say is the legal tools that we've provided through things like the UN Declaration Act that will ensure that Indigenous peoples have the legal tools they need, not just to continue that progress, but, and this is sad, but I think to fight for the rights that our government have established in law with future governments that maybe don't understand or don't care about the rights of Indigenous peoples. There is a lot of, I would just call it racism and systemic discrimination, both inside of government and outside of government. MPs come to this table, as you know, with wildly different experiences and beliefs. And the law that our government has passed to provide that framework will help to prevent, I would say, ongoing systemic oppression through, for example, a reduction of funding levels or through the removal of First Nations care and control over many aspects of everyday functioning. That would be a huge step backwards, to be honest. And what I would expect actually after 8 years of being involved and being consulted, let's not forget that indeed Stephen Harper refused to meet with First Nations leaders on a regular basis. Our Prime Minister, as you know, commits to meet with all of the distinctions-based groups at the national level, at the regional level, very frequently at the national level. It's at least once a year. There are formalized mechanisms of meeting with Indigenous peoples and leaders across this country, and those exist because of the leadership of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party. And quite frankly, I think the expectation has been raised.
Minister?
That any party that wins government in the future will...
Minister, I'm sorry, I'd ask you to stop. I'll free up the members of Parliament. I wanted to respect my undertaking. I let you go on for another 2 minutes, but now members have to go and vote if they wish. Minister, would you like to stay with us? I would ask you to, because it's an important meeting for all of us. And do you think that you'll be able to remain and come back after the vote?
Able to come back after the vote, but I will obviously be here at your invitation in the future. So I appreciate the opportunity. Merci beaucoup.
C'est dommage, mais nous...
It's a pity, but we do understand. Thank you, Minister.
Je vais maintenant suspendre la rencontre.
The meeting is suspended. going to resume the meeting. Everyone, please, your attention if I may. So we'll continue with Ms. Khalid's speaking time, but just beforehand, Mr. Clerk, is it possible for witnesses to stay a couple of minutes extra since the vote interrupted things? Could you stay at least 15 minutes more? Would everyone agree with that happening? An additional 15 minutes? The witnesses too? Yeah?
Till 1:15, because I have a hard stop at 1.
Puis les autres membres du comité.
What about other committee members? 1:15 or... Well, otherwise we have 28 minutes left, and folks did come here in person, so I'm just wondering.
Okay, I'll make a
Parfait. Merci beaucoup, Madame Khalid.
Thank you very much, Ms. Khalid. Much appreciated. Three minutes. You have 3 minutes left.
Very much, Madam Chair. So I will ask you, and obviously the minister is now gone, but I was a little bit curious about the Atlantic Water Authority's structure and its practical role in supporting First Nations communities with water system monitoring. Can you maybe help us understand a little bit how that works?
Thank you for the question. So the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority has been designed and controlled by First Nations over the last 10 years. And their function is largely akin to how municipalities run services. And I was talking earlier about the need for First Nations to manage and control their capital and their operations. The Atlantic First Nations Water Authority will now do that for up to 17 First Nations in Atlantic Canada and all of the Atlantic provinces. And that comes with significant cost, and Indigenous Services Canada is supporting the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority to the tune of $257 million over 10 years. So there comes with considerable resources, but it also really means that First Nations organizations will manage and support First Nations in their own affairs. And that's a significant shift, and it's part of the departmental legislation that created Indigenous Services Canada, which is largely to support the transfer of programs and services to rights holders and to those organizations. So we're proud to work with the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority and recognize that they're the first organization to be in this space, and we hope that many other First Nations aggregates and institutions will follow that model, not only in the water space, but in also other core areas that have been discussed today and in others like housing and general infrastructure. Thank you for the question.
And if I may, how do you measure the success of such an authority? How do we know that they're actually fulfilling the mandates that communities and government want them to?
It's a great question. Mandates, and thank you for the question. Mandates come from First Nations leadership. And so certainly the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority as an Indigenous institution is accountable to its constituents, or it's the people that it's providing services to. And Indigenous Services Canada has a funding relationship with the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority, which is based on a series of deliverables. But the deliverables that I think require kind of consideration is the deliverables and improved services that Atlantic First Nations people will experience through an institution that's managed by a First Nations entity. And so that relationship not only with ISK, which we will remain a partner with the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority, but the development of that institution and the relationship and accountability that it has for leadership and the citizens that it provides services to is critical. And that includes clean drinking water, wastewater, fire flow, and other components that were illuminated by the Auditor General, and that's a tremendous success in Atlantic Canada. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
30 secondes.
30 seconds.
C'est tout?
That's it?
2 minutes.
2.5 minutes. Sorry. Yes? One moment, please. I'll just check with the clerk.
Oui, donc à nous.
Well, once again, we're going to be doing the same thing. If everyone agrees, we'll just continue while the bells ring for 30 minutes. It's a great meeting for me, presiding over this meeting. It's an exceptional circumstances. So it's actually my turn for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much for being here today. I have questions about a follow-up on the meeting on the 14th of June 2022. And Ms. Wilson, I'm directing my question at you. It's your predecessor, Ms. Fox, who was in attendance. I asked her the following question. So, since 2021, what timeframes were put in place for infrastructure plans, for example, in order to address the water infrastructure issues? And Ms. Fox responded that she was going to take a look at it, provide us with the figures that we'd asked for, and she did that by way of the clerk. However, in her response that I have here, she said there are the first undertakings to bridge the infrastructure gap and that would be concluded by 2023. This is now the end of 2023. Where are you at when it comes to completing the first steps of the undertakings to bridge the infrastructure gap, please? Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We have indeed not completed our efforts in bridging the gap. We do have a plan, that said, and I'll ask Nelson to elaborate. Could you please forward that plan through to us, or if you already shared it with the committee? Last year, you were supposed to have finished by 2023, and now you're telling us that things won't be finished this year. When will you finish bridging the gap, infrastructure gaps, at least in terms of investments?
Thank you for the question. I think, firstly, I had the pleasure of attending that meeting as well with Deputy Fox. And in the period between that discussion and today, we have engaged and First Nations from coast to coast to coast on essentially the question about what are some of the paramount infrastructure needs that would be seen in a given community. And that was extended to colleagues in Crown Indigenous relationships where they engaged the ITK and MNC on similar questions. We're kind of proud to kind of announce that we had this tremendously high response from First Nations to the tune of 72% of First Nations came forward to identify their needs in kind of in a robust way, and we're in the period of kind of consolidating that data. And I would say, some of the core findings include kind of the need for continued funding in core areas like community infrastructure, water, which we're discussing today, and the continued need for planning. So we're in the process of kind of putting a capstone on that report, and I want to thank First Nations for their ongoing participation. Of course, the data collection on infrastructure needs never ends, but we have a good milestone in terms of the overall quantum of need and the prioritization of First Nations relative to their infrastructure priorities. Thank you for the question.
Merci. Donc là, je vois qu'il y a des.
Thank you. So I can see that people are gesturing. Mr. Dalton, the floor will be yours, and then Mr. Desjardins, if everyone agrees, will proceed in that manner. Mr. Dalton, 5 minutes.
Very much, and thank you for joining us here today. So whoever is kind of responsible in education or the spokesperson for education, I've got some simple questions, and I don't mean to be patronizing as I ask this, but what skills are needed in education would be needed to be a doctor or nurse? What are some of the basic skills? Just quick. Who's the skills educational in the educational field? I'll answer if you can.
Amongst Canadians, what is the
in
skills
Canada? Yes.
required?
What skills? What education? What type of education would you need for becoming a doctor, entering as a doctor?
You'd need to go to medical school and graduate from medical school.
And you need to have what subject skills would you need to excel in?
Science, chemistry, biology.
Yes, good. Thank you. Science, chemistry, biology, correct. To be a teacher, and I was a teacher for many years. I know it depends upon what type of teacher, but what would be some of the basic skills that you would need?
You would need to be able to adapt to children. You'd be able to work in a school setting.
Yep,
You'd
good.
need a bachelor's of education, perhaps.
Yes, thank you. Those would be some of the things, ability to read, to write, to communicate. If someone wants to become in the trades, a heavy-duty operator or a welder, obviously they need training in the vocational skills. The point of the matter I'm trying to get to, and I found it a bit of offensive with the minister, and I wish she was here, when she kept on talking about colonial metrics. I think that, that's a bit patronizing. I'm Indigenous, I'm Métis, and Indigenous people want good-paying jobs. They need real skills, education. They don't need fluff. They don't want participation ribbons. They want those skills. And I'm a little tired of hearing from the Liberal benches and from others about just the other metrics. We want to participate and be involved in the society to benefit our families, our First Nations, our communities, our country. And so this is really important. And so it's very concerning when we hear the on-reserve graduation rates is decreasing, that it's adopting and it's going lower. It's like we're watering it down. This is not helpful for First Nations and Métis people. So I'm appalled by the woke speaking from the minister before us and not going down onto opportunities. My father, my aunts and uncles attended residential schools. My father was sent to another residential school, so we wouldn't have to attend residential schools. But one thing he emphasized is for us as a family, as children, to get a good education. I have one sister that is a judge, another was a lawyer, another is a nurse, and emphasizing education. And that's what First Nations people need, and Métis is a strong, and not just, this is for the world, and this is for the Indigenous people. Sorry. We want to succeed and do well in this society. So I'm just venting a bit, and I'm not personal towards you, about some of this games that is not helpful to lift First Nations out of poverty on the reserves or anything like that. We want to see that development. And I have a question. I was an MLA in British Columbia until 2017, and at that time, what we found on the reserves was that there was not the funding, there was not it was challenging for many of the First Nations, some of the supports. So I'm just wondering, and I haven't really followed closely, maybe there's some good news. Has there been some real development with regards to, in particular in BC, but I guess across Canada, to the the standards on reserves as opposed to the provincial standards? Has there been a real improvement, investment, and graduation rates? Well, actually, I have the answers already on reserves. Thank you.
Madame la Présidente, si je peux avoir...
Madam Chair, if I could have an additional 30 seconds or 45 to respond. Well, that's exactly what you have left, 40 seconds.
Acknowledge some of the back and forth that we've had on education targets, because it's been a long and very unsatisfactory discussion. I realize that. We've been having it since 2018 when it's come to education targets. It's really unfortunate. So while calls for targets have been occurring at this committee, much has been changing on the programmatic level. Standards, all types of changes in many of the various programs, and co-developing transformation in education with a commitment to develop new methodology within that timeline as well. So essentially, because First Nations criticized our methodology, the OAG has criticized our methodology, we actually didn't want to spend a lot of time trying to reinvest in that methodology. We didn't want to rely on it. So we hope...
Monsieur Dalton, votre temps.
Mr. Dalton?
5
So
seconds.
really hope
5 seconds.
at this discussion, if we can today, by allowing us to explain the new methodology that we developed with First Nations. Thank you.
Monsieur Desjardins, vous...
Mr. Desjardins, 2.5 minutes.
Questions from First Nations that have supplied me important questions that they expect answers to. First Nations are deeply concerned, as people are everywhere, about sustainable and long-term access to water. Water on reserve links to those off reserve. And in your testimony, I recall the minister saying that. Water on reserve, how is Canada ensuring that First Nations jurisdiction under a treaty is not further undermined through federal water legislation?
It's a very good question, and I will ask Nelson to respond to that. And certainly source water issues and jurisdiction have come up very frequently as part of this engagement. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think the adherence of rights and First Nations and nations being stewards over their own affairs is clearly was a core component of the previous iterations of the legislation, the consultation draft that was shared with many First Nations, including Alberta First Nations. And that consultation draft spoke to many things, but I probably would highlight the first few paragraphs of that draft spoke to rights and First Nations being controlling their regulatory, water, and legal affairs in their communities. And we're hopeful, should we have the opportunity to bring legislation into the House, that rights would be underscored and we would be able to legislate that rights in response to the questions from chiefs from Alberta. And I appreciate the question, and please thank them for us. Thank you.
Another question. The cost associated with the needs of the treaty peoples for infrastructure and water is not settled. How can you give control for a scenario where those figures are not fully confirmed or understood?
That's an excellent question. I appreciate the question. I think, as Ed mentioned, the understanding the infrastructure gap begins with a conversation. We had that conversation last summer, and 72% of First Nations participated in that exercise. And in no way is that exercise complete. In essence, it follows, I think, the spirit and tenets of Indigenous Services Canada, which is continually work with First Nations partners based on their self-prioritized needs. And so our first kind of flush, our first foray to understand the quantum and the delta of what infrastructure is required in First Nations has to begin with that conversation, but in no way does it end with that conversation. And I think we're committed to work with First Nations based on the resources available to the department in order to build the best infrastructure at the best place at the best time. Thank you for the question.
Merci. Votre temps est terminé, Monsieur Desjarlais.
Sorry, your time has run out. Mr. Desjarlais, Ms. Shanahan, 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I'd like to give Ms. Wilson some time to go over the new methodology with us. And if it's appropriate, no, he's not here. I was prepared to share my time with Mr. Desjarlais, but we'll continue, please. Ms. Wilson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So the fundamental change in our graduation rate methodology from the one used in the previous departmental reports is we now follow a cohort of students who enter grade 10 in a given year, and we provide two sets of data: students who graduate on time, that is within 3 years of entering grade 10. We also now, newly, for the first time in our departmental report that was just published, give an extended time as well, and that's within 5 years of entering grade 10. That statistic is 44% of students in that cohort graduate with a year or two of additional studies. That's really, really critical because it reflects what First Nations have told us about the way First Nations students learn. Some need to care for young families, some need to work, some have health and family and community issues. Those 2 extra years were suppressed, were not indicated in any previous ISC reporting. Because our previous methodology, which was rightfully criticized by partners and the OAG, said that only measuring students who enter and leave grade 12 is not representative of the full story. That's what we listened to. That's what we changed and co-developed with partners. This grad rate applies to all First Nations. That's what's reported. We also have regional education agreements, which are fundamentally driven by what First Nations partners define as their outcomes, their needs, their goals, their objectives. Through a performance measurement framework, they also define the activities that they know will close their gaps and the costing for those activities as well. That's what regional education agreement is. The example referred to today of the First Nations Education Council in Quebec is the most recent, sort of most public example of that. At that scale, it's 22 First Nations in Quebec. They're working to develop their own First Nations defined metrics, their indicators, their results, to talk about graduation rate in their way. And that can complement and inform what the department reports on as an aggregate. Also referred to today as not having a one-size-fits-all. We had to be delicate and listen to First Nations who expressed concerns of having a set target to work towards. The improvement year over year, based on this new baseline of 26% on-time graduation, 44% of that same cohort extended time graduation. That's what we'll see going forward. That mirrors the Pan-Canadian graduation rate, which is published by Statistics Canada. It also mirrors more closely what provinces do as well. And it will give that sort of on and off reserve comparable context to compare or contrast to based on what our partners see as their vision. So in summary, a new methodology, on-time graduation within 3 years of entering grade 10, 26%, published newly this year for students in this cohort, and an extended time graduation, which shows a 44% graduation rate. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that thorough answer, because I think it helps us, even though normally education is not the purview of the federal government, but in this instance, of course, in Indigenous affairs, it is. I've had the experience of working from time to time with the survival school in the riding next door to me in Ganawage, and very impressive what I have seen there, the results and what the students have gone on to do, and how they contribute in a very meaningful way to our community as a whole. So it's I think it's the kind of work. Actually, I'd like to see that. You know how we say we can always learn lessons from the way different communities do things, and I think it's something that we could learn also in our other more conventional provincial school systems. But back to water filtration and water advisories. Water filtration is only a small part of providing clean water. Perhaps, as Deputy Wilson, you can talk to us about water protection. What kind of work is Indigenous Services doing to support communities with wastewater and source water needs?
We would be happy to talk to you about that for sure. Go ahead, Curtis.
Il ne vous reste que 10 secondes.
You have 10 seconds remaining.
Thank you very much for the question. So it starts with water. It starts with the source water, and then you're right. It goes through the water treatment plant, and the types of services provided in that plant vary greatly from different types of treatment depending on the quality of water, and it goes through different areas within that plant, and then it goes into a distribution system, which also has to be adequate, and into homes, and the water coming out of those taps need to be safe and clean for drinking.
Merci beaucoup. Avant de commencer.
Thank you very much. Before we start a final round, we have enough time for 1 minute per party, and then we'll have more than enough time to go and vote. So if everyone agrees, 1 minute each. Mr. Vidal, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very quick. Mr. Allen, I appreciated your thorough explanation of the switch to the cohort method and kind of what predicated that. It's all very clear information that's in your departmental report. So my question is I'm going to come back to a question I asked the minister. Maybe you can answer it for me. I totally understand the history. I understand how we got here. I may be a little bit frustrated with how long it took, but that's fair, okay? In the 2021 and the 2022 Department of Results reports, it talks about the baseline data being developed for this new methodology. And in the 23 report, all we see is kind of the target going forward. Do you have the numbers on where that was historically? The results reports seem to indicate that you were measuring that data the last couple of years, and I'd just like to know where we were in the prior years relative to where we set the target at, if that makes sense.
Essentially, it took 3 years to develop the new methodology to produce the new baseline of that 26 and 44% for that cohort we have. We need to have 2 years to compare and then the year to gather the data, which is why we had to continue to report in previous years up to this year using the old methodology, even though we were developing the new methodology.
Can I be really, really quick on
Non, désolé, c'est à madame.
No, I'm sorry. Ms. Yip, 1 minute.
Okay, I'm not sure that we have time. Is the vote at 1:10?
Vous avez le temps.
You do have enough time. You have 45 seconds left.
Okay, can you give us a sense of the process of developing and formalizing education agreements with First Nations?
So it's done through a structured process. We essentially meet with the mandated team from the First Nation, and we start through going through various pillars that we've defined in our public material. It starts with First Nations defining their objectives, their gaps, their vision, their goals, and then what timeline they would take to get to those closed gaps beyond the comparable funding that's given now, what defined activities would be needed to close those gaps, and then the defined costing for those activities over a period of time to achieve gap closing, achieve the defined vision and outcome. In a nutshell, that's essentially the process for an REA. Thank you.
Parfait, je vais m'octroyer une minute.
Perfect. I'll give myself 1 minute. I'll be as tough as myself and as on other members. So on the 14th of June 2022, the Auditor General made an interesting statement. The more we push back these timeframes, the higher the risk that future generations of First Nations grow up without clean drinking water, and yet this is an essential need. We know that it's impossible to flourish if your primary needs aren't met. This speaks to the dignity of First Nations and takes away all economic development opportunities. Do you feel that you've neglected this file? Do you feel that you're really on the right track so that in the next Auditor General's report, we'll be able to say no more safe drinking water advisories on reserve? Done and dusted. Thank you very much for the question.
We've neglected this file. We've worked very hard at prioritizing. When I first joined the department, the minister indicated to me that her biggest priority was water. And so it has been a priority for all of this team, and everyone has done their absolute best, and I'm very proud of them. Thank you.
Monsieur Desjarlais, vous avez une minute de clôture et nous allons.
Mr. Desjarlais, 1 minute.
Chair, continuing my questions, if this legislation is not intended to deal with treaty matters and the obligation of the Crown to ensure First Nation entitlements are fully met, where will these important matters be addressed specifically?
I'll ask Nelson to speak to the treaty issue when it comes to the legislation.
Yeah, certainly, I think there's 2 parts to that question. I think what the water legislation could or should be, I think, is a question for parliamentarians once it enters, should it enter the House. But certainly we hope it respects First Nations rights, underscores the need for building frameworks for adequate funding to support infrastructure needs and development of a regulatory environment. With respect to other conversations, which could be quite large, I think there's existing tables to speak to education, to speak to health, to speak to non-legislative water activities. We have colleagues here from Crown Indigenous Relationships, which helps support treaty negotiations and the implementation of long-awaited treaties. So there's multi-pronged approaches for many conversations with First Nations partners, but we're hoping we can bring to rest at least a regulatory gap on water affairs through this potential legislation.
Merci aux témoins d'avoir été présents.
Thank you to the witnesses for being here. Is it the pleasure of all members to adjourn the committee so we can go and vote? Thank you very much. Committee adjourned.